What's up everybody, welcome back to another video here on the Simply Car Things YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much for tuning in as always, and before we get right into it, if you guys could go ahead and leave a like on this video as well as subscribe to my YouTube channel down below, I would appreciate that very much. Now let's dive into today's topic, which is the up and coming BMW G87 M2. This is a car that I've been wanting to discuss on this channel for a while, and for good measure. I personally believe this car is one of the most important unveilings for the BMW M lineup, and just for BMW as a brand in general. Ever since the M2 was released with the F87 platform, it has cemented itself as one of the best driving modern BMWs, and many journalists have even praised it as being one of the all-time best BMWs that have ever been released off the factory line. So with this up and coming G87 generation, there are some pretty big shoes to fill in. And just being quite frank as well, it seems that recently with a lot of the M products and just a lot of BMW models in general, the company has taken a somewhat controversial direction, mainly pertaining to a lot of the design of their vehicles, some of the hardware changes and implementations in some of the cars, and just overall it seems as though the BMW community has been very polarized recently over a lot of these new cars. So I think for many people, the M2 G87 is the final straw. Now with that being said, you guys know I'm a diehard M fanboy, and of course, just like with any new M product offering, I am very excited and eagerly anticipating the unveiling of this new M2. And you can already see just a little bit of it right here with some spy shots of this car being tested on the Nürburgring. So according to Beamer Post, there's been a thread that's kind of been ongoing and updated over time about some what I believe is to be confirmed info that we do know about the G87 M2 competition, and that is what I'll be referencing for a lot of this info throughout the video. Now the first and most important thing to note is that this car will only be unveiled as the M2 competition. Now it's going to have two transmission choices, the 6-speed manual coming as standard, thank God, and then we also have the optional ZF8 torque converted unit, which is an automatic transmission, which if you guys know my opinion personally on that gearbox, I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's good, but for many reasons, which maybe I'll make a separate video about it, I'm just not entirely convinced on that gearbox. But I'm very glad to see that the manual is coming back. The G87 is going to be on a rear-wheel drive only platform, which I think is great for the M2. It's smaller proportions, smaller size. It's going to be a more pure driving experience and cater to more of the purist or enthusiast of the BMW M brand. The rear-wheel drive just totally makes sense. There's no reason to get this car with xDrive. And also, as standard, the car will feature the S58 twin-turbo 3-liter inline-6 engine, which is phenomenal to hear because the S58 is an absolute powerhouse of an engine. It's a beast, it's manic in its power, and it can make a ton of power, and it's pretty reliable as well, according to my understanding. The car is supposedly said to have 455 horsepower out of the factory, and in addition to all the powertrain options being carried over from the M3 and M4 G80, we're also going to see pretty much all the suspension and drivetrain components as well transferred over. So in essence, we're going to get all the goodies that the M3 and M4 gets, but in the smaller, more nimble M2 chassis, which is essentially what they did with the F87, the M2 competition as well. And I'm great to see that they're sort of sticking to that formula with the G87. I think on paper, this is great news to hear. The other cool thing to mention is that it doesn't seem as though this time the M2 will be dogged from the get-go. And what I mean by that is when the M2 was originally unveiled for the 2016 to 2018 model years, unfortunately, it was just released with very sparse options. It felt almost like a watered down M car, if you will, because it didn't have options like individually adjustable suspension or throttle response. It was fitted with standard 2 Series seats. It didn't get M mirrors. It didn't even get a, true M powertrain with the S55. The M2 was fitted with a beefed up N55 variant. So out the gate this time, BMW is making sure that they're doing the M2 competition justice, which I think is great. They're carrying, again, that formula from the M2 competition of the F87 generation, and they're going to make sure that this is a good car to release to the public and to their enthusiasts. One thing I would like to see, I would love to see just a little bit more options in the way of, the interior specification. I'd love to see some more paint colors being available than what we got with the F87. It was just a very bland array of colors. I don't necessarily mean bland, but a very limited array of colors, I think would be a better term, mainly because there just wasn't a whole lot of customizability. There wasn't a whole lot of personalization that you could have done with the M2. You couldn't spec any M2s with individual colors, and with the M2 comps, I mean, Hockenheim Silver, beautiful color, but how many times have we seen it on the street, you know? It's like every other M2C is in Hockenheim Silver, so it's like, the other great thing to note is that as standard now, the G87 M2 will be offered, according to this article or this thread, with a carbon fiber roof, which is a great thing to hear because we know that the F87 M2 weighs approximately the same as an F80 M3 or an F82 M4. There really isn't a huge weight difference, and you know, for a lot of people, I know personally that I've spoken with at least, part of the reason why many people, you know, opted for something like an F80 M3 or an M4 was because of the carbon fiber roof, which is a huge selling point if you're looking to get into an M vehicle. Not only is there a great functional advantage to having a lower center of gravity, lesser weight up top, but also the carbon fiber roof just looks beautiful. And so to finally get that as a standard option with the M2, I think is a very welcomed addition. And overall, you know, that's just a great move on BMW's end. Now, there are two things that I should mention that don't seem to be included with this G87 platform. It appears that carbon ceramic brakes will not be an option. Maybe they're going to be saving that for higher models. Again, in my opinion, not a huge deal, because if you're going to be tracking this car or you're going to be driving it hard, you don't want the carbon ceramics. Yes, they stop amazing, but the cost to maintain them in terms of brake pads and then carbon ceramic rotors is extremely expensive. And so I don't think it's a huge deal. And if the steel brakes, which I'd imagine are going to be carried over directly from the M3 and the M4, are going to be fitted to the M2, there is no shortage of stopping power. Those brakes with those 6-piston calipers up front are just absolutely phenomenal. They brake on a dime. I mean, that car can slow down even faster than it can accelerate, honestly. Don't quote me on that, but I'm just saying the brakes are really good. The other thing, unfortunately, which appears to be missing out of the M2 lineup is the ability to option carbon fiber bucket seats in the car, which I think is a very, very big concern of mine personally, because if I'm looking to get an M2, you know, if I'm a purist, if I'm an enthusiast, if I'm going to be tracking the car, if I'm going to be driving it spiritedly through back roads, you know, I want performance. I want the M2 because it's the most engaging car to drive. I want the M2 because it has the smaller, nimble proportions. I want the car for the driving feel. And if carbon bucket seats are not an option, in my opinion, that's a huge missed opportunity by the M division. So according to this thread on Bimmer Post, it seems as though so far there's no mention of carbon bucket seats. Is that confirmed? We're not sure yet because the car obviously has not been unveiled, but I really, really hope, fingers crossed, that BMW does decide to include these seats with the M2, because if not, I think that will be a very big missed opportunity, not only for sales of the M2, but also just for the overall, you know, function and feel of driving that car. And I guess to some degree, it makes sense why they wouldn't include the bucket seats on this car, because based off what we know so far, the M2 is essentially getting all the goodies from the M3 and the M4, as I mentioned previously, into the smaller, more nimble, and supposedly lighter package as well. And so to some degree, it's like, what is the appeal behind picking up an M3 or an M4 when you can just get the cheaper and the more performance-oriented M2 that has all the same hardware? So I think maybe if they don't include bucket seats, but they leave that for the M3, the M4, and the M8, it'll incentivize consumers to maybe opt for, you know, the higher end model, I guess, as opposed to something like an M2. Just a little conspiracy theory I have, but I don't want to go off on a tangent about bucket seats. Now, I do want to transition this discussion just a little bit into something that I think is a big concern for many people. Now, if you guys haven't seen the Winner's Circle podcast, which is hosted by my buddy Gabe, he goes by Blues Clues M3, I will release a link to it in the description box of this video, the Spotify link to the podcast where we talk about all things sports car related. I am the co-host on that podcast, and I would really appreciate if you guys could go check it out, because I think you'll benefit from a lot of the content that we talk about and discuss related to sports cars. We were talking about the M2, the G87, and specifically how we personally believe that for many people, this is the last straw from the M division. Lately, it seems that BMW, to a certain degree, has alienated a large part of their fan base or their consumer base. You know, you can say what you will, but the G80, the M3, and the M4 obviously has a very controversial and very polarizing design. And while they are amazing cars, they're very performance capable. There's no doubt that these cars definitely serve to alienate a large part of the consumer base and a large part of the fan base. And, you know, a lot of people aren't all that crazy about the car. And I know there are people that love it as well, but obviously there are a good chunk of the community out there that's just not a fan of the car. And you just look at a lot of the changes they're making, the switch towards just a more synthetic driving feel, very questionable design language amongst many of their models. And we've seen the G42 2 Series, which was just unveiled. I don't think it's a particularly ugly car by any means. I think it looks much better than something like the 4 Series Coupe, but I don't think it's either a particularly beautiful car. And I think it is growing on me. I am, you know, excited about it, but I'm very cautiously optimistic about the M2. And in terms of design, I really hope BMW nails it. Everybody loves the M2. There's no one really that doesn't like the M2, and it's a beautiful car. The F87 just had such an aggressive front end. Every angle about it looks so good. I will admit, it is a little bit of a stubby looking car. Kind of has like that bulldog look to it, but again, that's inherently, you know, what is sort of special about the M2 is the fact that it just has that smaller and somewhat compressed kind of design to it. So again, I'm very cautiously optimistic about this car. You know, what we're seeing so far, what we're seeing on paper about it, what we know about it so far is very, very promising. It is very exciting. And I'm looking forward to tremendously seeing this car be unveiled, because this car has a lot to live up to, not just in terms of its predecessor with the F87, but just in terms of representing and being a showcase car for the M brand as a whole. So I hope the design is awesome. I think it's pretty safe to say this car is definitely not going to get the pig snout grille of the G80 and the G82. So that's already, you know, great news. But still, you know, there's a lot that needs to be done right in order for this car to be a great success. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna wrap this video up. Are you excited for the new M2? What are your thoughts overall? Let's have a discussion down below in the comment section, and I'll be sure to engage with pretty much every single one of you guys out there. And again, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take it easy, everybody. Bye-bye.